Hello everyone, I am Atulya and welcome to the 7th session of the web development track of Mozilla Durg, Developers and Community and KVG Durg presents the Developer Days. Platform partner DevFolio, authentication partner Savo Labs, supported by Script Foundation and streaming partner StreamYard. Today we have with us, first we have Sparsh and secondly
I'm
we are going
irrelevant today.
to yeah. So today we are going to have Sreekaran. Let's have Sreekaran on the screen.
Ta-da! Okay, so
Uh,
Sreekaran on the screen.
so just so nobody is confused, I had some audio issues with my laptop and headphones, so I'll be joining in from two devices. You don't get to see one of me; you get to see two of me. You're lucky.
It's actually great. एक से भले दो है, like we have saying.
Okay, so can you just brief about what are we going to do today?
All right, perfect. So I was called on to give a talk about how you can get started on MongoDB, but I had other ideas. You remember that MS Dhoni ad, right? Experts told me to call him the spinner, but I had other ideas. No, so there are about 20,000 different blog posts and YouTube videos that explain how you can get started working with MongoDB. But what I saw is that none of them actually touch upon when you should use MongoDB, when you shouldn't use MongoDB, and when you don't even need a database at all. So that will be the focus, the meat and potatoes of what I'll be covering in this session today. And in the end, if we still have time, I'll try to walk through setting up MongoDB Atlas on stream. And you can all watch me fail. So yeah, that's sort of what we have planned for you today.
So yeah, I guess that's all from our side. Then you can. It's your time. Then all to you,
The
Sreekaran.
screen is all yours.
The stage
Oh,
is all
God.
yours.
You're going to
the
disappear and
presentations.
let me suffer.
We are here.
We are at the back.
All right, perfect.
All right. Over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Sparsh. Thank you, Atulya. Once Sparsh's face disappears, I'll start with the talk. Perfect. Okay. So welcome everyone to this very short introduction to MongoDB. Yeah, let's get started. So first of all, who am I and why should you be listening to me? I am Sreekaran, as you would have already seen on the title of the video. I am a software engineer and DevRel. I'm sort of getting into DevRel as well right now. So I'm somewhere in that space. I love everything about hackathons. I've organized a bunch of hackathons. I've mentored, I've judged, I've hacked a lot. And I've been a part of about 100 different hackathons right now in the last couple of years, right? And my presentation designing skills can't hold a flame to all of the people, can't hold a candle in the wind to all of the people that have come before me to give presentations. So I decided to steal this template. Okay, I decided to borrow this template from Major League Hacking's opening ceremonies. Yes, hopefully I'm not sharing classified information, but yeah, I stole a template and I decided to make this presentation. On the left of the screen, you should be able to see where you can find me on my socials. That is Twitter at SKXRXN, same for Instagram. Don't ask me how I got my first name as a domain. I just did. I'm very lucky. But yes, let's get started. Perfect. Now I'm going to explain something again. I know the title says Intro to MongoDB. Karthike, please don't block me for this, but I am not really going to walk you through MongoDB full this time around. We're going to be talking more about when we should be using MongoDB, when we shouldn't be using MongoDB, when we should consider alternatives, and when we don't need databases at all, right? Because that's beyond giving you the tools. It's also very important to give you the knowledge of when to use them and where to use them, right? Okay, perfect. Also, one second, let me pull up YouTube chat on the side here. So if you have any questions, feel free to post them in chat and one of the admins should pull them up for you. Okay, let's go. Right, I know this is following a database talk that already came on SQL, but let me give you a primer again on the basics, right? So what is a database? Uh, Thank you, Karthike. A database is essentially anything that can store and retrieve large amounts of data. Most databases come with the additional feature to modify the data that you've stored in them as well, but it's not an entirely necessary feature for something to be considered a database. And also, most modern databases support CRUD, which is create, read, update, and delete. Now, the most important part of this that you need to understand is that anything you can think of, pretty much anything you can think of, is a database. You could call someone up, you could give them data as inputs, you could have them write all of those pieces of data down on a piece of paper and have them recite it back to you, and even that would be a database, right? So while anything is a database, there are, of course, standards that we need to stick to. There are different tools that we use. We use SQL, we use MongoDB. And let's be honest, a lot of us just use Excel for our databases when we're building personal projects. I know I'm guilty of that. So yes, to sum up, anything and everything is a database, but the most commonly used ones are spreadsheets, SQL databases, and NoSQL databases. All right, perfect. So next, when do we need databases? This is also another important aspect that we need to cover. So when you're building an app and when your code needs to persist state or it needs to carry over data over multiple different iterations, multiple different runs, that is when you need a database. And the reason I am specifying this, the reason I'm talking about when you should be using databases is I see a lot of people building projects and integrating databases into them just for the sake of integrating databases. For example, if you don't need to store data at all during the project, right, during the app, during running of the app, then you probably should not be using the databases. One of the cardinal sins that you can make as a software engineer is sticking stuff where it does not belong, right? So if you're designing a portfolio, if you're designing something really simple, use HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Don't reinvent the wheel. Don't try to use React. Don't try to use, don't try to overcomplicate things. Okay. Harkirat, I see your message in chat. I'll share the presentation that I'm using right now on my Twitter as soon as this talk is over, right? So you should be able to grab the presentation from there, right? So when should you not be using databases? When you don't need users to store data over multiple different runs. Also, for example, maybe you're using authentication like from the end of Savo Labs or from OAuth, Auth0, something like that, right? You're already using their databases. In that case, you probably won't need to integrate your database into the project, right? And there are a couple of other situations. It's really important to look over what your use case is. Oh, you want the template? Sure, I'll share the template as well. Perfect. So again, it's really important to understand when we should be using a database and when we should be using when we should be using just a spreadsheet, and maybe even a JSON that is stored outside your config files, right? When you should be using config, JSON, they all have their own place. So when you're using structured data, when you have a set of structured data that you need to be storing in that specific format, then you start using an SQL database. When you have, again, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but when you have a lot of data that you need to send and retrieve very rapidly, then you would be using a NoSQL database. But on the other hand, if you just need to store some variables as part of your configuration, then you probably would not need to use a database of any sort. A config file or a JSON would be better suited for that use case, right? So let me cut out quickly here to tell you, go ahead, subscribe to Developer Days, go like the video. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to post them in chat and I will get to them. Okay, next. Let's see, what do we have? All right, what is MongoDB and how is it different from SQL? We're getting to the meat and potatoes of the argument right now. So MongoDB is an open source database management system, much like a lot of other systems that we use, like PostgreSQL. that uses a document-oriented database model. This is in contrast with SQL that traditionally uses a schema that traditionally uses schema. In MongoDB, we'll store data in terms of documents, which are a set of flat files that have their own binary storage objects. What does this mean? Essentially, we don't have the same structure that we have in SQL. If you've ever worked with SQL, you know that before even starting your database, you need to set up a schema. You need to set up rules for what data goes where. You'll be setting up data types. And it's a very structured format to store data in. MongoDB, on the other hand, does not come with any of these requirements. You don't necessarily need to set up a schema or a format that you need to abide by. It's in that sense, it's a very free flowing format that you can use, right? Okay. So this also again implies that data storage is very compact and efficient, and it's able to handle high data volumes, because one of the issues with SQL is that because every time you're inputting data into the database, it performs a series of checks to ensure that the data fits the format that you've specified in the schema already. Since we don't need to do that in MongoDB, it's super great. It's great for having high volumes of read and writes, because you don't have the added overhead of performing a check every single time, right? Yeah. So again, now that, yes, this, okay, this is an example of just this, the screenshot that I provided in this slide is just a comparison of naming conventions when we're looking at traditional SQL databases and MongoDB databases. For example, databases are called the same things, but what you would call a table in a traditional relational SQL database, you would call a collection in a MongoDB model, right? There's a little bit of naming convention changes that you need to get used to, but it's an easy transition to make, right? Okay. So when should we use MongoDB? This ties back to the first point that I made, that beyond giving you just the tools, it's important to understand when, where, and why we should be using said tools, right? So I just want to start this section off by saying there is no wrong database for a project. In most cases, you probably don't need to stick to SQL. You probably don't need to stick to MongoDB or even a spreadsheet for that matter, right? Yes. But there is a caveat to that statement, which is each particular database system provides certain advantages that would fit in well with certain systems. Like I mentioned, if you have high volumes of read and writes and you don't really need structure in the data that you're storing, MongoDB is a great option to go forward with. On the other hand, if you're, let's say you've got a huge project and you cannot, let's say you're a dependency for multiple other projects, right? And you cannot afford your data to fail during transactions. You cannot afford your data to be free flowing. You need a structure, you need a schema. In that case, you would revert back to SQL, and that would be a good fit for you, right? So like I said, some projects would benefit more from the rigidity and the data validation that SQL offers, which comes with its own set of consistencies, while others would benefit more from NoSQL's freedom to rapidly, modify the structure of records and, and the absence of schema, essentially. So now, again, I'm going to dissuade you from using MongoDB again by saying most projects, once the project starts maturing, once you've got a decently large sized code base, you would settle on a schema that is to be used for the rest of the project. And as your project becomes more and more stable, that schema would get set in stone better and better. And you would no longer need to have the absence of schema, as that would just create problems for you. Essentially disruptive changes to the schema will become less and less common. In that case, you would probably want to move to an SQL database. So, okay, again, MongoDB gives you high performance. MongoDB gives you high volumes of read and writes really, really quickly. SQL gives you structure. That's sort of the gist of it, right? Okay. that covers the meat and potatoes of what I wanted to talk about. Again, let me also touch on Mongoose. Mongoose is a sort of ORM, object relational model for MongoDB that you use in conjunction with Node.js. And what this lets you do is, to put it super simply, it is, let me go back to the previous slide. I'll touch upon this later. But yes, it gives you an easy way to interact. It's basically a glorified API that gives you an easy way to interact with the database that you're using. Essentially, let's say it transcribes certain operations to objects and classes inside of Node.js, and it lets you call them from your code itself instead of having to make a query every single time you want to make a change or enter data or update or retrieve data, right? Right. Most ORM APIs, most ORM object APIs like to perform the validation while writing to a database. So it does become a little redundant that we use MongoDB there. But again, because we don't have that validation at MongoDB's end, because we don't have that validation on MongoDB's end, that gives us high volume of reads and writes. It gives us really, really high speed to work with, right? Perfect. Another reason we could want to use MongoDB is that most of MongoDB, depending on what use case you're using it for, they store all of their data completely in memory rather than storage, which allows just orders of magnitude higher and faster reads and writes than what SQL gives you, which lends itself to very data volatile applications like caches and such. That is another use case that MongoDB would fit in really well with, right? And talking about Mongoose again, tighter integration with SDKs also implies that developers rarely have to write raw queries, which gives you the added advantage of no NoSQL injection issues in your app itself, and that gives you an added extra layer of security. Right, that is sort of all I had to talk about MongoDB. Now, let's see whether we have any questions. If there are any questions, I'd love to answer them. Now is your time to ask. And once we're done with those questions, you get to watch me fail live on stream to set up MongoDB, Atlas rather. So yeah, Sparsh, do you want to come back, pull up questions that people might have and ask?
I guess there was a question in the chat. Just a minute.
There was a question in the chat.
Yeah. Okay, so I got it. Avanish wants to know why we need database if we have local storage.
Okay. Why do we need databases if we have local storage? That's a fairly simple question to answer. Your local storage is not going to lend itself very well when you're having an application that tens of thousands of people read and write to. Imagine setting up your computer, imagine setting up your laptop to receive reads and writes from 10,000 different users that are using your application. And let's see how long your laptop survives under that kind of load. But jokes aside, it gives you a centralized place, or in some cases, a distributed place for people to read and write to, for apps to read and write their data to. And that's just way more performant than having one system, one single laptop, one local storage to work with, right? If you're designing a CLI application, then fair enough. You don't really need to use a database. You could get away with using a spreadsheet because I'm assuming you're going to be the only person reading and writing to that particular instance of to that particular instance of database. But any other case, when you have multiple people using your application, you're going to need a database. Right. What else?
There's a question.
Okay. Yeah.
I hope that answers the question. So
yeah, if you need any more clarifications, please feel free to post a follow-up question in chat.
Yeah. So in terms of ease of use, which database is better, MySQL or MongoDB?
That is a very, very subjective question. I would say, first of all, don't go behind ease of use. It is far more important that you have a performant database for the particular application that you're using. But that aside, this is a very, very personal question. Personally, I find that I work better with MySQL databases because I like the structure, I like the rigidity that relational databases contain, right? That also gives you a certain level of consistency and reliability. Generally, I prefer the structure over free flowing data. And other people, I've seen other people prefer MongoDB because it's faster to read and write to, it's faster to use. It's certainly faster to set up because MongoDB's cloud offering is very well integrated with Node.js with any other SDK that you might use. So again, it's a coin toss. Honestly, you should try both and figure out what works for you. I hope that answers your question. What else is there?
All right. Now, this one more question. Language to know to use MongoDB.
Have you pulled it up? Okay, yeah, perfect. Sorry, I was looking at the YouTube stream. Right. You don't need to know any particular language to use MongoDB. They have a certain set of languages that they very easily lend themselves to, that they have SDKs for. And let's say you work well with Python, right? MongoDB has an SDK for Python that you can integrate into and use really well. Let's say you work well with JS. MongoDB is very well known for working with JS exceptionally well. That's where the MERN stack was born from. Yeah, so you don't necessarily need to know a particular language to use MongoDB. It's language agnostic, so to speak.
I guess we don't have more questions for now.
I did see one other thing. MongoDB or MySQL. Right. Again, that is sort of what I tried to cover over the course of the last 10, 15 slides. Hopefully that was, hopefully you were able to make some sense of it, but essentially when you need structure in the data that you're storing, when you need it to be very, very reliable and not necessarily super quick, you would use MySQL. And when you need very, very fast read and writes, when you're storing data that is of many different forms, you would use MongoDB. I guess that's it for the questions.
Yeah.
Depends on now all that's left to see is do you all want to see me fail on stream or will I be spared? Sparsh, Atulya, it's honestly up to you. Let me know whether I should get started with this. Although we might go a bit above time if we're starting with this. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Completely fine.
Okay, perfect.
The stage is again yours.
Suppose I have I see another question. Suppose if I have a project of bank, then which one is the best? First of all, you probably would not be using either in the case that you do get a bank contract. You would be using what they specify. But in general, for systems like banks that require high levels of rigidity, high levels of transaction stability, you don't want any failures in the system whatsoever, SQL is the way to go. Right?
Now,
let me.
one more question. Is MongoDB replacing SQL or both are equally in use today?
Right. Both are definitely equally in use. They have their own specific use cases. MySQL is not going anywhere. Trust me. MySQL is here to stay at least for the next 10, 15 years. Especially if you're going into the field of data science, MySQL is the name of the game. If you don't know MySQL, you're probably not going to get a good job. So yeah, MongoDB is definitely not replacing MySQL. Yes.
We have one more question, right? Which database companies prefer most?
Yeah.
Again, I feel like I'm repeating myself about 10, 15 different times, but depends on what product the company has and depends on what their use case is. If they need very rigid structured data, then you would go for SQL. If not, you would use MongoDB. Right.
Okay. I have a question.
Okay.
Yes. She can complete. I have a question, my personal question. You can you complete first.
Yeah, I just thought of a better answer to the first question that was asked. Why shouldn't I use local storage? Local storage is also a kind of database, like I said, but I'm just trying to make the answer more clear, but it's only available in the browser when you're working with web apps, and it is limited to a single client. If you need multiple client applications, then you need to go for a centralized database. Right. I hope that was a better, more clear answer for the question that you asked. Right. So what's up, Sparsh? How do you want
Okay,
to
so I have
humiliate
a
me this
question.
time?
No, I don't want to humiliate you. I want to get humiliated now because see, I was actually doing an internship at a company. So these I have heard like many of the companies prefer Oracle database. So
Okay.
so what's your say on that? So like like we are right now functioning with MySQL. We are functioning with MongoDB, but Oracle is also a very dominant player in the market. So what do you want to say about it?
This is, let's just say, this is a very this is a very hotly contested topic. But again, Oracle DBs also give you a very similar structured approach to databases that I personally don't prefer working with Oracle databases. It feels very antiquated. I've worked with the only place I used to work with Oracle databases when we were using JSP and servlets in this company that I was interning at. Very, very ancient
Same.
architecture,
Same,
right?
exactly.
I absolutely hated working with it. But again, if it again, a lot of these companies still do work with legacy code bases. The issue with uh, moving to newer code bases moving to a newer stack every time something new is released is that you need to code something from scratch. You need to ensure that it has the same level of stability, it has the same level of structure as this code base that you've been working on for the last 20 years. And it's honestly very, very difficult to make that work. Companies have lost millions and millions of dollars doing that. So I do get where companies are coming from with asking people to just continue working with legacy code bases, but it's a balance. I personally don't prefer working with them, but if you have to, you have to. That's about it.
All right. I won't ask a follow up question because I actually have one.
Sure. I
Because
mean, go ahead and ask. I'm not going to say anything.
see, even I feel the same that Oracle is actually ancient right now. But when these companies like majorly like the companies who are using Oracle even now are the companies who have been dominating industry from like 10 to 15 years. Their respective
Yes.
industries, because that was the time when Oracle was at boom. So they're using Oracle right now. So I just want to
Mhm.
ask that now when we have a better stack in our hand, technical stack, and the companies are using Oracle. So instead of using JSPs and JSP servlets and using JSON basically,
Mhm.
so what are the alternatives that we can use to integrate an older system with a newer stack? So like
Are
what
you
are the
talking about
replacement?
revamping the? Are you talking
Yeah,
about revamping the entire stack or just the database, just the
just the
backend?
database, just the backend database.
That is a question that I honestly don't know the answer to. I'm going to be real with you, but I mean, this may okay. Let me see. Why does this feel like an interview? God, I, I genuinely have no clue about how you would go about integrating an old database with a newer front end stack. I would say from my experience working in different companies with various levels of legacy code bases, not a good idea. You don't want to revamp just one particular section of the stack because you would have various endpoints that are left exposed that you don't want to leave exposed, right? That leads to security vulnerabilities, and that will not be fun. Trust me. But yeah, it's probably not a good idea to change up just the database part of it.
So it will remain as it is.
Yes,
We'll make monuments of
until
Oracle database.
until the system fails, it's going to live. But here's a little bit of gyan for basically every single developer who's watching, every single student who's watching rather. See, it's fun to learn the newest tech stacks. It's fun to learn React.js. It's fun to learn Vue. It's fun to learn MongoDB. And these are generally much easier to work with than old tech stacks like JSP, servlets, Oracle databases, stuff like that, right? But here's the deal: when the entire market when most of the market rather is still oriented towards these legacy code bases, it makes sense for you to go ahead and learn those. The market dictates what you learn. That is that is one aspect of it, obviously, and another aspect is what do you enjoy doing, and it needs to be a healthy balance between these two. I'm not going to go say learn PHP if you find it absolutely horrible, if you find it torturing you, but just recognize the fact that most this is coming from a little bit of freelance experience. Most people prefer WordPress websites. Most people want PHP in their websites. I hate PHP. I hate WordPress, but the market decides what I learn. And it is important to recognize the fact that this is also a viable option. This will also give. There are a certain set of jobs and a certain set of roles that expect this tech stack from you. And if you gel well with that particular tech stack, it might be worth looking into and learning it, because you will be in the minority as compared to the people that are running after the newer tech stacks. I don't. This is about. I think this news is 3-4 years old now. But the last time the U.S. government wanted a COBOL developer, there were about 2 or 3 people left in the United States who could actually properly program in COBOL. They ended up getting millions and millions of dollars per year just to work on COBOL code bases. So again, make sure you have a healthy balance between what the market wants and what you want to learn. Just something that I've been thinking about for a while now. Free advice, take it or leave it.
I am awestruck by the answer actually. Like it completely answers the question, and moreover, it gives me a cherry on the top. So yeah, brilliant. So now
That's
we'll
good.
leave. We'll
Yeah.
leave.
So you still want to watch me fail on stream? I was hoping I could avoid that since we already crossed the half-an-hour threshold.
All right.
Let's see.
So we will leave now. The stage is all
Perfect.
yours again.
Okay.
Oh God,
Sure.
great.
Bye bye.
I'll probably need to switch the screen that I'm sharing. Give me a second. Let me pull up MongoDB Atlas and walk through setting it up. Hmm. Share screen. Okay. Sparsh, could you pull my screen back up on stream? Yes, I've reshared it up. Perfect. It's been a long time since I've set up MongoDB Atlas, and I did not practice before starting the stream. So you're going to get to watch me fail in real time, and hopefully that gives you some more insight into what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. Right. Let's sign in. All right. Okay. So let me drop a link in chat. Cloud.mongodb.com is where you go to set up your Atlas database, right? I forgot to touch on this before actually starting to set up MongoDB Atlas, but there are multiple different ways in which you could go about setting up a MongoDB database for yourself. They support all major operating systems and all major platforms. Please zoom in a little bit. Right? Is this better? Let me just wait for some feedback from chat. All right, perfect. Right. So there are a couple of different ways you could go about setting up your MongoDB instance. Um, for local MongoDB, they support all major operating systems and platforms. but they also do offer a cloud-hosted software as a service, database as a service rather, that you could go into cloud.mongodb.com to set up and get started with MongoDB as quick as possible. Right. Set up a random organization project one. Right. I'm just going to say Python, continue. Okay, right. I do believe there are some hackathons that provide free credits to MongoDB for you to set up your own databases, but don't quote me on that. For now, let's get started with the free tier. Create. Right. Okay, this is where we would set up our server location, specify what system we want, how much RAM. M0 Sandbox just offers this limited set of uh, systems that you can use. So this is your only option. If you're upgrading to a paid tier, you could probably get a server with a bit more RAM and storage. Right now, we can go ahead and create a cluster. Let me pull up the documentation as well. Um, Again, very important to know if you're not familiar with getting something set up, if you're not familiar with using something, rule number one is go use the documentation. The documentation will more often than not, especially for these bigger projects, they'll be really good for you to. They'll give you really good guidance on what you should be doing to set up your database, set up your service, whatever be it. I'm going to share my entire screen so you can see me walking through the documentation as well. Sparsha Ratilia, could you pull my screen back up? Right, great. Okay, right. So we've already created an Atlas account. That's done. Have we deployed a free cluster? No, we have not. It's being created, so it takes about 1 to 3 minutes to provision. Let's see. Is there any other steps we need to follow to do this? Also, the stream doesn't seem to be showing my screen. Are you all able to view it?
Yeah, it's not visible actually. I don't know why. Like even the what you have shared right now, it's not visible to even us. I'm just pinning it, but it's all transparent.
Huh. Okay, let me see. Yeah, a little bit of technical difficulties give us some time. It wouldn't be a stream if everything went well. So that's there to console us. Try now.
It is still blank actually. It does. Yeah,
Huh.
now it's visible.
Okay, perfect. Right. Okay, so let me rehash the last couple of minutes. So we started a new cluster. We're going to deploy it, and these take about 1 to 3 minutes to provision. Meanwhile, I'm going to go through the documentation to see if I've missed anything, to see whether there are any other steps we need to add that we need to complete in order to deploy a cluster. So let's see. This details, the documentation is really good for MongoDB. And let me drop a link in chat. Right. This details really well what we need to do to get started with our first MongoDB Atlas instance. Right. Okay. So we've already created an Atlas account. We are in the process of deploying our free cluster. Login. We've done all of that. Build the cluster, and it's a little outdated. The documentation is a little outdated, but we can still go ahead with this. Yes, starter cluster M0. We created that, set a server location M0 sandbox. We gave it a cluster name, and we also created the cluster. We're waiting for it to be deployed. Right. Looks like that just got done. Okay. I'm gonna have to add my IP address. I wish I would have used a VPN when I'm doing this, but sure, let's expose my IP to the entire world. Uh, let's go ahead and create our cluster first. Free tier available. Okay, here's our first roadblock. It tells us to select M0 sandbox, but that does not seem to be visible here. Hmm. Am I doing something wrong? Which is probably the case. Oh, okay, I had clicked upgrade, my bad. Okay, let's see. Let's connect to our cluster. We need to add an IP address if I'm not wrong. Click connect, right. What we're going to do is add your current IP address, add it in there. Let's just say admin, DB user password. Perfect, create database user. Okay, choose a connection method. Huh, all right. View documentation. This is what you want to do first thing. Right. Let's use the GUI for right now. I don't have MongoDB Compass, so let's go ahead download it. Save and perfect. I'm going to need to add my admin credentials here right now, so I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Right, I'm done authenticating, so I'm sharing my screen again. Someone could pull that up, that would be great. Perfect.
We are facing little technical difficulties. I hope the audience doesn't mind. Sorry, guys, on our part.
What happened? Oh, okay, yeah, the delay. No worries, chill.
Yeah,
Right. Probably should have prepared for this section beforehand, but oh, what the hell. People are getting a real-time view of what it's like to try to set up something for the first time, right? All right. Okay. There we go. Let's see. This probably should not be exposed on stream. Uh, I have no doubt that a couple of people that are watching are cringing at the fact that I'm sharing these credentials in real time, but oh, what the hell. Okay. What was the password I gave again? Let me pull this off stream again. Right. The I seem to have already forgotten the password that I gave. Let's see. So I see a question in chat. Can you pull this up, Sparsh or Atulya? Can you tell me what MongoDB Compass does?
Yeah, it's up.
Right, perfect. Right, so MongoDB Compass is essentially a graphical user interface. It's a GUI for you to interact with the database instead of actually integrating it into within your code, which I don't want to do right now on stream. So it's basically a simple way for you to write queries and create databases, organize stuff. Right? Okay. Add new user. Perfect. Read and write to any database. Add user. Perfect. Okay, now that we've connected to the cluster itself through the GUI, we can go ahead create our first database. As far as what a collection is, for those that are not familiar with MongoDB, I had one slide in the presentation that mentioned this, but a collection is basically MongoDB's version of a table. That's what it's called. Database name, let's say developer is. Actually, you know what? I'm going to call it Karthike OP. Right. Database names cannot contain the character. All right, perfect. Okay. And here we can start creating collections. We can start modifying the collections that we've created. We can add data. We can import data through JSON and CSV, most importantly. And this gives you sort of a UI to work with. This is how you try to get started with MongoDB Atlas and fail horribly on stream. That's been it. Data in MongoDB is JSON. Okay. It is not a JSON per se. It does work well with JSON, but it is of a similar format. It's not structured like a table. You can add multiple different formats of data. It's not a JSON in it's not a JSON, but it's of a similar format. Is the best explanation I can give right now. Right. So Sparsh, Atulya, if you want to come back on stream and bid the viewers goodbye. You're muted, Atulya.
Yeah, I just saw this now. Do we have questions? You guys can ask questions if you have more.
There's one question.
Yeah.
Oh yes, that is why we created users. And when we created users, if you noted the UI at that point of time, it gave us different levels of access that we could provide for that particular user to the database. So yes, each user has their own specific set of roles, privileges, and permissions. Right. I believe you already answered this question, but MongoDB Compass is a GUI to deal with MongoDB databases and collections. Right?
All right. Next question. Data in MongoDB is JSON question mark.
It is of a very similar format to JSON, but it's not a JavaScript object. That is, it's just like a dictionary in Python is pretty much the same format as a JSON, but it's not a JSON, so to speak.
All right. Next question.
All right. How does database provide consistency? Sorry, how does MongoDB provide consistency? Okay. So MongoDB is consistent by default. When you start using it, all reads and all writes are issued directly to the primary number of the replica set that you're using to deal with the database, right? And applications can also use, let's say, applications can also read from secondary replicas. which is sort of like creating a local Git repository, right? Applications can also read from secondary replicas where data is eventually consistent. So MongoDB has this concept of eventual consistency where in an SQL application, in an application that uses an SQL database, when you write to the database, the data is instantly reflected at every single point that you're reading. But that is not the case with MongoDB. Since it does not have the same rigidity and same properties as SQL, you cannot expect it to update in real time. And generally, it takes a little bit of a lag, a little bit of time to spread to the different replicas that exist of that particular database. And let's just say eventually it'll be consistent. That's what they mean by eventual consistency. It's a term that's used in MongoDB. In NoSQL databases, right? Right. I hope that answers your question.
I hope that answers Amit's question.
Yes.
Perfect.
All right.
Amazing.
So I'm getting called that.
Sparsh is all of a sudden Mr. Popular. Either that or Karthikeya is repeatedly calling Sparsh to scold him.
And maybe it's the case that okay, I should be the final bummer in the whole session today.
Let's just hope by the
Okay.
time I go back and text, DSC members, they don't block me.
No.
Hopefully the session was valuable. Hopefully you got some value from it.
Yeah.
It was very chaotic. But that reflects MongoDB perfectly. It isn't structured. It isn't just like NoSQL databases. My talk itself was not very structured, but I hope you did gain some value from it. So yeah, it was
really amazing on a very serious. It was actually amazing.
Thank you.
It was very candid, to be very honest, because when you start coding, a speaker comes to take a session. So everything is so systematic, and you think you're pausing the video again and again, and you're thinking, how this guy is doing it so perfectly? How is it possible? It's pakka, it's scripted, and all. You think about that, but this is the proof that developer is all candid. It's not scripted.
I disconnected from all concepts.
Yeah. Okay, so it's the time that we have to declare the challenges for the week. So this week's challenge for the web dev track is create and link a assignment submission form with a database. The submission link will be circulated in the chat box and will be also pasted in the, you'll get the link in the Discord too. And so it's now the time for announcing the giveaway winners. Okay, so
Just
what we do to announce,
Yeah, so Sreekaran got disconnected.
Okay, you want me to announce? Great.
Yeah,
I can do that. Just let me get connected to audio back again.
Okay.
Just to make sure I'm connected properly. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, no, give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Okay, great. Sorry, my phone has this really bad habit of turning off Bluetooth whenever I turn off the screen. So yeah.
It's fine.
Perfect. I missed the last 10-15 seconds, but my goal for this was for it to be, jokes apart, right? Jokes apart, I did want people to see me fail during the stream. I did want them to see that when you're getting started with a piece of tech, you're not going to get the hang of it very, very quickly. This is something that you learn. This is something that hackathons lend themselves to very well. Because in a matter of a couple of days, you need to get started with an entirely new tech stack. You're going to learn how to use it. You're going to fail repeatedly. You're going to build fast and break things, essentially. So it's completely okay to go refer to documentation. Google is your best friend. Stack Overflow is your second best friend, right? And you're probably going to, you're not going to get the hang of it the first time. So yeah, I did want people to see that a little bit. But yeah, hopefully, I didn't go overboard with that.
It was really amazing. Actually, it was amazing.
Perfect. Thank you. Right.
Okay,
All right. So giveaway.
Yeah. You have to, we do one thing, like you have to choose the winners. So We have 47 submissions today on our giveaway form. So just choose 5 random numbers between 1 to 47.
5 random numbers between 1 to 47.
And
Yeah.
please be slow. I'll have to
Yeah.
search.
Okay. I'm going to give you my roll number, which is the first thing. I've had the same roll number since UKG, which is 36. So that's the first number I'm picking.
All right. So on number 36, we
Who do we
have.
have? Let me give you a drum roll.
Ta-da! We
Can we
have
get a
Vimal
drum roll in
Anand.
chat?
We have Vimal Anand at number
Ooh,
36.
I noticed Vimal asking a lot of questions during stream. So
Cool.
good job. And hopefully you have fun with your 50 Bitcoin. Sorry, 50 rupees worth of Bitcoin.
So moving next after your roll number, what's next?
Okay, second. Let's see. I'm going to say 23.
23. On 23, we have Anam Khan. I hope I'm pronouncing the name right. The next
Congratulations,
number.
Anam.
Congratulations,
Uh,
Anam.
and
Okay, third.
just as a disclaimer, they're definitely not sending these numbers to me in chat asking me to say those specific names. just to throw some little bit of doubt into this, right? The third number, let's say 3.
3.
Yes.
It's Chaudhary Tara.
Chaudhary Tara or Tara Chaudhary?
Chaudhary Tara.
Okay, congratulations, Chaudhary Tara. Congratulations, Chaudhary Tara. All right, for the fourth number.
Fourth number.
Well, roll number 1 always gets picked on a lot. So this time I'm going to flip the script. Roll number 47. Let's take 47.
Oh.
Last number.
The
Let's go.
last submission.
It's easy to find. It's Kushal Joshi. Congrats, Kushal, for that. It's easy to find. 47, you just have to click on the form and you get to the 47th
Yes.
number.
Congratulations, Kushal. And we've got one more winner to go.
One final number.
I've already said one in 40s, one in 30. 17.
What?
17 is my fifth pick.
Okay, 17 is the fifth pick.
17 is my final pick. And I think it's a little sad that this giveaway section is more exciting than the talk itself. But, whatever.
Okay, so if 17th number, we have Rosie Chatta. And congratulations, Rosie, for the same.
Congratulations, Rosie. What was the price again? Just 50 rupees of Bitcoin?
Yeah, 50 rupees of Bitcoin. Voucher of 50 rupees of Bitcoin. You can download CoinSwitch app and then you can insert
Perfect.
that over there and you get 50 rupees worth of Bitcoin on your portfolio.
Hold the Bitcoin and maybe 20 years later it'll be worth $5 million. You can say you won it at developer days. In which case, let me just note down the names of the people that won. I'll come back to collect my cut.
We'll give you a cut.
Yeah, perfect. And it was Tara Chaudhary, Sparsh. They just replied in chat and Tara Chaudhary.
It's Tara Chaudhary, but she filled Chaudhary Tara.
Yeah.
Okay, then that's your fault. All right.
All right then.
Yeah.
Any
So I
words
get
from
that.
you? Final words.
Final words. Shit, I have to choose carefully. Okay, so I'm going to go a little bit deep with this. I'm going to pull from the last 4 years of experience. I'm assuming a lot of the people that are watching this stream are going to be students, right? First year, second year, third year, final years. No matter what stage you are in, you still have a certain limited amount of time that you have left in college. These 4 years that you have, or 5 years, depending on what course you're studying, this particular amount of time that you have is the best time you're going to get in your life to explore, to pick a tech stack that you're going to specialize in, or to find out what you like working with, to find out what you don't like working with. So don't be afraid to spread your legs out, to spread out, to see what exists, to see what you can do. Even I went through a phase of exploring with content writing, digital marketing, all that different kinds of stuff, right? So try out different tech stacks, try out different entire fields, you're probably not going to get a chance like this again to explore what you want to do in your career for this, right? So use your time wisely. You've still got time left in college. Participate in hackathons, contribute to open source, write blogs, give talks, and most importantly, help your community members, right? So that is the best advice I can give you. Hopefully, you gained some value from the stream. Thank you for having me, Sparsh, Atulya. Thank you for having me, Mozilla Durg. Thank you for having me, KUG Durg and developer student community, Karthike, Vinayak, everybody that is behind stream. Sorry if I missed someone. Message me on WhatsApp. I'll send you your 10 rupees. But yeah, thank you for having me, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Sreekaran, for your time actually. And
Yeah.
you have been very busy. And guys, many people were saying that you setup बहुत प्यारा है. Everyone's saying like, I like the setup, nice setup, nice setup in the beginning. So I just want to spill a piece. He has actually work going on behind the screens in that laptop which you can see on screen, and he's still giving the time over here. So thanks so much, Sreekaran, for that. We really,
Thank you for
really
having me.
appreciate that.
I enjoyed giving a talk here.
It was
And
amazing to have you with us today.
I just want to give one last shout out to Khalid. Unfortunately, this talk was supposed to happen on Saturday, and I had two different states of postponement. And Khalid worked really, really well with me. He was super kind, really, really amazing to work with. He helped me reschedule the talk. Thank you so much for understanding, and thank you so much for helping me reschedule the talk. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much to Atulya and Khalid from my end also for the same.
Thank you for being
And
amazing hosts, Atulya and Scott.
so
Also,
Dheeraj too at the
thank,
back end. I almost
thank you to
forgot.
the viewers.
Dheeraj and Sonal
Yes,
and
thank you to the viewers
every
for
single
popping in.
So finally,
Okay,
Atulya can wrap it up for
Yeah.
the team.
So that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us for the 7th session of the web development track of Mozilla Durg Developer Student Community and KUG Durg presents the Developer Days, platform partner DevFolio, authentication partner Savo Labs, and supported by Script Foundation, the month-long celebration for developers. Thank you so much and have a great day ahead.